Another day in Berea, another move from Andrew Berry. A little more than 24 hours from when the Browns traded Joe Flacco to the Cincinnati Bengals, the Browns remain active again. The Cleveland Browns trade Greg Newsome in a sixth-round selection to the Jacksonville Jaguars for cornerback Tyson Campbell and a seventh-round pick. We'll talk about it, break it down a little bit, why the move happened, and why the move could pay dividends for both teams. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We appreciate everybody for the support here for us all at the OBR, whether it is looking into the best Cleveland Browns content there is over at the OBR.com. Highly suggest you look into the VIP package while you were there, the insider forums, ask the insiders, and of course, your subscription gets bundled with a subscription for for Paramount Plus, Premium Plus. And if you are a UFC fan come January, that will pay even more dividends. And for all of you and your support here for the OBR streaming network, beginning daily at 6 p.m. with Browns 3D. Barry, we've added some new shows. Of course, this regular season, the Gang of Three, and of course, Pete and Joe on Tuesday nights, and Fred Greetham and Mike Keefe doing a great job bringing in a Cleveland Browns media member each and every week. Glad you guys are all enjoying it. Of course, make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube, and of course, make sure you are subscribed to the OBR on Twitch. Sorry I couldn't be here yesterday. I guess, dental practice isn't what it used to be. You shell out a large amount of money to have your child's tooth fixed, and then 7 days later, not even a full 7 days later, your child calls from college to explain that that same tooth is currently in her hand after trying just to brush it. But we are back today. Late last night, Browns again trading. So this is, I guess, 3 trades in about 8 days now, 2 trades in about 30 hours from Andrew Berry. And to say Greg Newsome was traded certainly does not seem that odd. I think for a couple of years now, Greg Newsome was pretty much a popular name to possibly be traded by the Cleveland Browns each and every offseason. Certainly Martin Emerson, and when he came in to Cleveland and kind of cemented himself on the outside, and Greg Newsome taking more of the reps at the slot, certainly Greg was open about how much he would prefer to still remain on the outside. But I think we're going to give a lot of credit, certainly, to Greg Newsome in the fact that, Greg forever did what was asked of him. And Greg Newsome no longer being with the Cleveland Browns shouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, in my opinion. Here was a guy that at times said he was frustrated and, was doing something that he'd rather not do if it was his choice. But I think in 2023, he had a good year. He excelled. And I think he was just enjoying the moment, was enjoying the ride. And then, of course, 2024, again, Greg to the inside. And, when there are opportunities, Greg got to play on the outside, but most of the time Greg was locked into the inside. Now, unfortunately, this summer, Martin Emerson went down, blows out the Achilles, put Greg in the position to go back outside. And to his credit, I think Greg wasn't having a terrible year. A little handsy at times. It happens. If I'm a corner, I'd rather get the pass interference than get burnt. It's just smart. You know what I'm saying? But Greg is traded along with a Cleveland Browns 6th-round pick to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 7th-round pick and, of course, cornerback Tyson Campbell. Now, Newsom and Campbell were in the same draft of 2021. Greg was drafted 26th overall by your Cleveland Browns, whereas Tyson Campbell was drafted at 33 overall by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So certainly not much disparity there. Campbell already has his contract extension and 70 so million on the contract extension, of which to this point Jacksonville has paid almost, I think, 30 of that money. So the Browns have a cheap, controllable contract for Tyson Campbell for the remaining of the 2025 season and the 2026 season. Greg Newsome, as we all know, will be a free agent at the end of the season. Greg will go down to Jacksonville and kind of going from, of course, the outhouse to the penthouse, going from a 1-4 team to a 4-1 team. And Greg will go down to Jacksonville and will go play for a team that now is running a defensive scheme that features more zone coverage, which is certainly something that suits Greg Newsome. I wouldn't say, Greg is scheme specific, but I think Greg has an intelligence, and from his basketball background, it certainly translates into zone defense, obviously within the NFL. Tyson Campbell was extended, of course, by the Jacksonville Jaguars. That is a regime who gave him that extension that is no longer there. So when these types of deals happen with players, and obviously a lot changes within the organization hierarchy, one of the things those folks usually look to do, unless the player is just so transcended it doesn't matter, is maybe move on from somebody that doesn't necessarily fit what they are doing best. Campbell, at 6'1", 190 and change, longer, physical. He's great in run support. More suited to the heavy man scheme that you would see playing for Jim Schwartz. At times, he has issues getting his head around, and he's been, not going to lie here, he's been lit up pretty good this year. But his length, his physicality, he is signed through 2027. As I said, it's a very controllable number for the Cleveland Browns for the remainder of this year and, of course, 2026. It gives the Browns one less starting player to look for in the 2025 into 2026 offseason, this offseason coming up. It's going to keep Miles Darden out there, just kind of hopefully doing his thing and continue to grow at the slot. And of course, we know Denzel's not going anywhere anytime soon. I think also what this tells you in regards to the Browns and Greg Newsome is that I don't believe the Browns really ever thought there was going to be a world where they were going to put pen to paper on a long-term deal for Greg Newsome. If they truly thought that was the case, either A, the deal would have been done by now, or B, they would have kept Newsome around. It's just that simple. I think they found something that worked for them financially, knowing that they felt that there probably wasn't going to be a large or any future, I should say, with Greg Newsome beyond 2025. Wish Greg well. Have no issues with Greg Newsome in the time he was here. I like the addition of Tyson Campbell. I think this is something that can certainly work for this team, this Cleveland Browns team, and this Cleveland Browns defense going forward. The draft pick swap, it's what it is. It's just the way these deals go now. Browns still have 10 selections in the 2026 NFL draft, so I'm certainly not concerned about that. But I think it was two organizations that were in the process slowly of moving on from players, and each team maybe finding someone on each other's roster that maybe felt they had more value for said player than the team that currently held him. And I think a lot of that had to do with, what is the new defensive scheme down in Jacksonville. Campbell's had a little bit of a rough year. There's just no way around it, obviously. He's given up a ton of yards. He's got to get much better, of course, at, getting his head around playing the ball, not so much as the man. This Cleveland Browns defensive line could certainly do wonders for Tyson Campbell's game. Shouldn't have to cover as long, hopefully. I think a lot of people were just thrown off by the timing of the move, and I just don't mean that it was dropped after 11 o'clock at night. Greg was playing good ball for Cleveland, but I think it was just, again, the case that the Browns, deep down in their hearts, felt that there was not much of a future, certainly, for Greg Newsome here with Cleveland. Now, Campbell, like I said, has at least 25. He's on paper till 27. Most of the money to be paid off, which hasn't been already, 25 and 26. And then a large portion for 27. And, on paper, he probably never sees that money, to be honest. But this also puts the Browns in a scenario where if they would like to re-sign Martin Emerson at the end of this season, who is slated to be a free agent as well, they can easily do that. They can let Martin Emerson work his way back here, so he can, continue his rehab, with the team that he started it with, and there would be no pressure on most likely what would be a 1 year, prove it money, and not prove it play, probably prove it financially, prove it health-wise for Martin Emerson. And you still have somebody similar to Martin Emerson on the roster. It's tough because I think a lot of people, don't bring up to speed that Martin Emerson, at times was struggling and struggling badly, of course. We all liked him, of course. We all liked the guy. Good player, tough player. But, there's certainly times where Martin Emerson was struggling. You get in my opinion, better version of Martin Emerson here, a more athletic and more faster version of Martin Emerson here in Tyson Campbell. The Shedeur Sanders stuff. My God, does this have to stop? There's a reason the Cleveland Browns don't play him and don't have a thought of playing him right now. He's not ready. Shedeur Sanders has some serious, legitimate issues as far as pass rush. It was blatantly obvious on the Colorado tape. And for everybody who thought that maybe that was over in the Carolina game in preseason week 1, which you saw at least a couple of plays that were extremely evident that those issues still remained. Go to the final preseason game against the Rams, where we sacked 5 times in a quarter. And to be honest, it felt like it was about 5 times in 10 minutes of real time. The Browns would love to see Shedeur Sanders hit the top of his game. But the reality is, if Shedeur Sanders is going to hit the top of his game, he probably wouldn't play it down or even sniff the field here in the 2025 season. Now, things are obviously vastly different within the Cleveland Browns team and roster than a lot of teams in the NFL right now. So Cleveland, if they do feel comfortable at some point, can roll the dice and see if they can put him out there and see if he can show some signs of being somewhat acclimated to the speed of NFL pass rush. It's continues to be so weird in regards to Dylan Gabriel. Because Dylan Gabriel, played well last Sunday. Again, it's not hard to look at the film and see that there was plays that he left on the field. But it didn't turn the ball over. Didn't take any stupid sacks. Hit a couple touchdown passes. It seems like nobody wants to admit that Dylan Gabriel may have played pretty well on Sunday. Certainly with signs of improvement. to be made. It just it's mind-boggling, and it's point where it's mind-boggling dumb that people are continuously going to Shedeur Sanders for quotes daily, when right now, if you haven't told us he's quarterback 2, he's still quarterback 3. He's dressed but not been eligible to play in any of the first 5 games. Just let the kid be. He is by far the most talked about, most interview requested third string quarterback in the history of NFL. And we know the reasoning for that, obviously. His lineage, his name. But the Browns are trying to see if they can get something out of him. But what they have to work out of Shedeur Sanders' game is not easy. You can either handle pass rush or you can avoid pass rush by the end of your high school years, certainly by your collegiate years. Trying to do that now is extremely, extremely difficult. And again, you're not going to put together a Hall of Fame offensive line. You are not going to spend your money and build the most expensive offensive line that ever existed. You're not going to do these things to accommodate a Shedeur Sanders. The problem necessarily in this entire scenario is not the Cleveland Browns. It's not Shedeur Sanders. And for once, it's not really even the Cleveland Browns media. This is big NFL media. And this seems like a lot of guys trying to stroke the ego of Deion Sanders, which he certainly doesn't need any help doing because he strokes his ego enough. Actually called the franchise that drafted his son. The only one, 5 rounds in, 31 other teams, passed numerous times. Browns passed 6 times. Called the organization that employs his son. The team who, after 5.5 rounds, finally called his name and selected him in the 2025 NFL Draft. Had the nerve to call the organization that employs his son sorry. How's Colorado looking there, big guy? This doesn't help things. And it certainly does not make Shedeur Sanders' life any easier in any way whatsoever. The kid has enough pressure on him, put on him by himself, trying to be the best that he can be. Got anybody who's a former NFL player who may even know his dad trying to tell the organization who drafted him and pays him how stupid they are, how foolish they look, that they are racist, they're bigots, they're holding him back. These are all things that some of these people are directing at the Cleveland Browns in regards to their handling of Shedeur Sanders. Why don't you fire up the tape from the last time Shedeur Sanders took snaps for the Cleveland Browns in late August against a Los Angeles Rams team? And I'll admit, I don't know pretty much who any of those guys were, or if any of those guys are even on practice squads in the NFL right now. He looked like a guy who was absolutely lost and could not handle pass rush in any way whatsoever. Ideally, if you want to see Shedeur Sanders be successful, you don't want to see Shedeur Sanders again till the spring or summer of 2026. But let's continue to talk about this and, throw these innuendos out there for engagement and, social media attention. You should all be ashamed of yourselves because you're just screwing up the kid's life and screwing up the kid's career and making it even harder for a young man who was drafted in the 5th round to climb the hill and fight the fight daily when he's got people who are trying to maybe get some sort of attention from his father standing up, looking like buffoons, speaking without knowing their asses from their elbows, and making this kid's life just 10 times harder. Amongst all the talk over the last 48 hours of the Cleveland Browns and trading away Joe Flacco and trading Greg Newsome for Tyson Campbell, something may have become amiss. And that's, oh, yeah, the Browns traveled to Pittsburgh Sunday to play the Pittsburgh Steelers. Never usually a good trip for the boys in brown and orange. In watching Pittsburgh to this point, nothing really just blows your mind. But yet they still sit atop the AFC North currently at 3-1 with a 2-game lead over the Bengals and a 3-game lead over the Ravens and the Browns. Still feels weird to say your last place Baltimore Ravens as well. Very weird. Aaron Rodgers is, I say he's playing all right. He's throwing for less than 200 yards a game. They're not running the ball well at all. Normally, which was always a staple of whatever success the Pittsburgh Steelers had. Running the ball well, playing good defense, and certainly, quarterback play. None of that is currently the case, though. Warren, for me, has always been a guy I've just absolutely just couldn't stand. I just think it's just an absolute headache for that Pittsburgh, on that Pittsburgh Steeler offense. Just seems like whenever there is a key play to be made, it's Ty Warren who just, gets you an 11-yard run on 3rd and 3 or, rumbles for a 23-yard, 23-yard reception in a big spot. Offensive line, they're not very good. Aaron Rodgers has been sacked 9 times to this point through 4 games. Browns got 3 last week against Minnesota, which still felt like an extremely light number. And you've got a big old moving target, big old sitting target this week in Aaron Rodgers. DK Metcalf has been kind of a nice addition for them. I would still say to this point, just the overall explosiveness in George Pickens' game probably had more value for the Pittsburgh Steelers offense than what DK Metcalf has done to this point. And let's keep in mind, to be fair, it is a small sample of, 4 games for DK. The plan is to hopefully have Tyson Campbell ready to contribute and play Sunday in some sort of role. And that's certainly, a difficult thing, with just the timing of the Newsome Campbell route. Is that both teams are full on into, the new week, the new game plan, and really hard to coach somebody up and coach somebody in a scenario like that. Defensively, they're playing okay. Obviously, they took advantage of the Minnesota Vikings when the Cleveland Browns could not. I think the Browns can run on them. And it feels nice to actually be saying that again. The Cleveland Browns can run on people. And that's certainly what's been the excitement to this point, of course, of Quinshon Judkins. 112-yard day last week in London, which, as we all saw, without the penalties, could have been a 150, 160-yard day easy. A rookie who, for all the time he missed, and that was certainly a big, big concern, was, with the missed time of Quinshon Judkins, him coming back and being just put right into the starting lineup, which certainly seemed, a little bit cuckoo, I would say at the time. Certainly has done everything to prove, that he was indeed ready. And it's really been a nice, nice start, of course, for Quinshon Judkins. But, we're going into Pittsburgh with an extremely young offensive skill group. Rookie, number 2 wide receiver, number 3, number 4, both second-year guys. Other than Jerome Ford, everybody in that backfield is just babies. Harold Fannin as well. These kids are all going to kind of go through it together. And I think that's probably one advantage they have, where Gabriel probably isn't your typical rookie quarterback, as he is soon to be 25. And there really isn't much kid to Dylan Gabriel. Of course, we know that. Every time the Browns seem to talk about, his play, his work ethic, his demeanor. It's Dylan Gabriel's team currently. I've said I probably would sit Shedeur Sanders for the rest of the 2025 season with no intention, of having him see live reps again until 2026. I don't think that's something the Browns are going to do. I think there's going to be a time where Shedeur gets a little run here this year. Unless, of course, Browns can go on a big, big run here. Certainly would be nice. Certainly wouldn't turn it down. Now, the thing for Dylan Gabriel is going to be, can you parlay one above average start into improvement here in your second start? And certainly not the easiest draw, of course. And, TJ Watt most likely coming from the blind side pretty consistently. Something that, definitely something to keep your eyes on, of course. Because, the predominant outside rusher, of course, for the Pittsburgh Steelers would come from Dylan Gabriel's blind side. Offensive line for Cleveland, I think, for the most part, is kind of rounding into form. Let's hopefully see a team that can avoid 5 penalties from one position on the offensive line like they did last Sunday with the left tackle position. No reason we should probably see Levingston this week. Probably going to be a huge Cam Robinson day. And for the small sample side that he actually did play on Sunday, besides the 2 penalties, his play wasn't that bad. It's the most difficult place to play for the Cleveland Browns, and it has proven to be so for an extremely long time. So if the kids can all go in there collectively, hold it together, and give the Pittsburgh Steelers 60 minutes of football, it's kind of what the goal should be. Hang around, try and steal it. As always, we appreciate all of you, for the support here for us at the OBR, whether it is for the best Cleveland Browns written content there is at the OBR.com. Look into the VIP access, the insider forums, Ask the Insiders. Of course, your subscription will get bundled with Paramount Plus. If you like watching people get choked out and knocked out come January, Paramount Plus is something you're going to definitely want to have in your rotation. For everybody who, joins us here nightly for the OBR streaming network beginning at 6 p.m. Eastern, just want to thank you all, of course, for support for everything we do here. Beginning with Browns 3D at 6 p.m. Make sure you subscribe to the OBR on YouTube. And of course, make sure you are subscribed to the OBR over on Twitch. Browns make another trade. Greg Newsome and a 6th-round pick to Jacksonville for Tyson Campbell and a 7th-round pick. Andrew Berry keeps wheeling and dealing. Manage your roster for today, but also manage your roster for tomorrow. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. And we'll talk to you all tomorrow.